Today we're talking about the Imperial Troop Transporter from 1979 by Kenner. Having signed the licensing deal with Lucasfilm too late in 1977 to get any toys beyond board games, puzzles, and items from the Kenner Coloring Corner on shelves, Kenner would make up for this in 1978 by releasing 12 mini-action figures with several compatible vehicles and playsets, large-size action figures, and a die-cast vehicle line. With a highly successful 1978 on the books, in 1979 Kenner would go bigger and bolder, fleshing out the large-size figure line, as well as releasing more 3 3/4 figures and more vehicles, as well as more playsets for this scale. In his second year, Kenner's 3 3/4 action figure line focused quite a bit on the Tatooine sequence of the film, building it out with playsets, vehicles, as well as figures. Other than Boba Fett and X-Wing pilot Luke Skywalker, all of the figures released in the second year were drawn from Tatooine. Droids and Cantina aliens dominated this second year, with the first variant Luke and Boba Fett outliers of the minifigure line extension. And it's worth noting, while the name may lead you to think the Death Star droid was from the second half of the movie, this figure is actually a twofer. The card art was pulled directly from the tarnished gold droid who appears on the Jawa Sandcrawler in the first half of the film. The card art has been touched up enough that the droid appears silver to match the figure, but eagle-eyed kids in 1979 who had gone to see Star Wars several times and had pored over various stills available in the plethora of Star Wars merchandise knew where this droid came from, and that the Death Star droid was actually a black version of the same droid seen quickly shuffling by as Han and Luke escorted Chewbacca to the detention center for their rescue attempt of Princess Leia. The Tatooine focus made sense. Tatooine was extremely toyetic, a term coined by Kenner president Bernard "Bernie" Loomis and delivered to the masses in 1992 via Stephen Sansweet's excellent book, Star Wars from Concept to Screen to Collectible. Tatooine was a most fertile ground for kids to imagine their own adventures. The Cantina aliens may have been blink and you miss them, but when left behind in the cantina as Luke, Han, Ben, Chewie, and the droids blasted off to Alderaan, their stories went untold. Even though Greedo died, several look-alike Rhodians wandered the streets of Mos Eisley. This opened the doors for kids to plot elaborate adventures from their own imaginations, and all these Tatooine toys enabled that. While initially Kenner had sought to go just off-screen, with things like multicolored C-3PO figures and Starglider Han Solo, both ideas that would have been easy reuses of existing tooling and therefore cheap and easy products to get to market with a quick turnaround time, Lucasfilm rejected these, wanting to keep the line focused on things that had actually appeared on screen. They even rejected the all-black stormtrooper, called either a Black Hole Trooper or Shadow Trooper, which had appeared in the Star Wars Daily comic strip by Russ Manning that was running in newspapers across America. The only non-movie figure Kenner would deliver in the course of the original Star Wars toy line was Snaggletooth, whom is based on a character who appeared in the Star Wars Holiday Special. They went so far as to even use card art culled from a still from the otherwise ignored Holiday Special. It seems most likely this was just a mistake that was missed by Lucasfilm and Kenner until it was too far into production, and easily overlooked as there was a Snaggletooth in the Mos Eisley Cantina as seen in the film. This is why it's curious that Lucasfilm allowed 2 items in 1979 that were not based on anything that appeared on screen in Star Wars, but did fit the aesthetic of a galaxy far, far away. And both did look like they could have appeared just off screen. 1 vehicle and 1 playset were released in 1979, neither of which appeared on screen. The first one we'll talk about is the Droid Factory playset. Molded in a tan orange plastic with brown crane and many droid pieces for kids to build their own droids, the Droid Factory packaging featured photography to help sell Jawa figures and fit nicely along the Jawa Sandcrawler vehicle, also released in 1979. Featuring many small parts, the Droid Factory was a favorite of many kids and appeared under many Christmas trees that year. If you were a kid who had the Land of the Jawas playset, this fit the aesthetic of that and could easily be used to build out that playset. It was also a highly imaginative and creative toy. allowing kids to build their own droids, as well as the only way to get an R2-D2 with his middle leg in the vintage line. The included blueprints helped kids figure out some specific figures that could be made, but really the only limitation was a kid's imagination. And of course the included parts, and how quickly you lost them. The Droid Factory was available for a brief time in 1980 with Empire Strikes Back branding, and with new box art featuring the original Luke Skywalker figure, as well as Ben Kenobi. While the name Droid Factory has endured through modern Star Wars toy lines, the playset itself has not been resurrected other than being retooled for the Jabba's Dungeon playset for the Return of the Jedi toy line in 1984. This is not the case for the other notable just off-screen toy to debut in 1979. This one has a lasting legacy and has at this point become part of Star Wars canon. Initially, the design of the Imperial Troop Transporter was entirely by Kenner. Despite this, it does look like it belongs in the Star Wars universe we saw on screen. This early on, Kenner designers had already gotten a knack of the aesthetics of George Lucas's world. The original prototype of this toy featured a more angular front, a design that possibly mimics a Star Destroyer. The retail version would have a rounded front. When Kenner submitted the original design for approval, the design they got back had been refined by Joe Johnston at Lucasfilm. This is where the more rounded look comes from. There are pictures of the prototype that show a black R2 unit. But whether Kenner was just using this for the mock-up, or if at one point they intended to release an Imperial R2 unit as part of the vintage line, is not entirely clear. Several fan customizers have made this black Astromech a reality in the years since. The design is not sleek and it's not pretty, but it fits right in with the TIE Fighters and the mechanical components of the Death Star playset. The Imperial Troop Transporter also had the ability to play several sounds from Star Wars, using a patented sound design that utilized a record player within the toy. While this was not necessarily the best reproduction of those sounds, in the age before a VHS player or streaming made accessing Star Wars easy, of the sounds, R2-D2 sounds the best. The authentic Star Wars movie sounds included were the Transporter engine sound, R2-D2, C-3PO, Stormtrooper Battle Command, Stun Rifle, and the Laser Cannon. There was also a switch that made the voices and sounds go faster or slower. The switch was located inside the rear compartment of the Imperial Troop Transporter. The set also included immobilization hoods for brainwashing our intrepid rebel heroes. Also included was a booklet that featured an early expanded universe story. Here we see Darth Vader sending a platoon of stormtroopers to Tatooine in search of R2-D2 and C-3PO. Predictably, this book does manage to cross-sell the Darth Vader, Stormtrooper, and Jawa figures, as well as the Patrol Dewback and Jawa Sandcrawler. The story neatly bridges the gap between "Look, sir, droids," and Luke, Ben, and the droids discovering the Sandcrawler and the carnage the stormtroopers left behind. The Troop Transporter would also be released by Palitoy in UK and European markets. In 1979, the Troop Transporter made an appearance in issue 31 of the Marvel Comics series. While the Marvel comic issues were not considered definitive canon, even in 1979, they were loosely canon, making this the official debut of the Transporter in Star Wars media. The Troop Transporter was available in 1980 with Empire Strikes Back branding, but was discontinued before 1981. For Christmas 1981, Sears would sell an exclusive version of the Imperial Troop Transporter that had a lower price point and had been retooled to feature none of the electronics. It also featured a slightly different deco and had been renamed the Imperial Cruiser. It would remain a Sears exclusive and available for several years thereafter. I recall seeing it in my local Sears as late as 1984, still with Empire Strikes Back branding, around Christmas time. Later, in 2015, the design would be reused in an episode of Rebels, and would even see release as a vehicle from Hasbro's Rebels toy line. It would finally arrive in live action in the Disney Plus Mandalorian series, which cements it as part of the official Star Wars canon. Later, the Vintage Collection toy line would release a version as part of their Mandalorian offerings, bringing the Imperial Troop Transporter full circle. As a kid, I did not have the Troop Transporter. However, I was able to acquire the booklet and instructions from a kid in my class. I traded in one of my extra Mel and Boba Fett's for them. I spent hours poring over both the book and the instructions, reading them until they fell apart, and since the line art was black and white, I also colored them. So, in the spirit of my childhood, enjoy this dramatic reading by Oz of Ostradamus Toys and the fully colored story from the booklet. One quick note, in the story there is one glaring error in currently established canon. At this stage in 1979, Owen Lars was not the stepbrother of Anakin Skywalker, but instead the brother of Obi-Wan Kenobi, as alluded to in the novelization of Return of the Jedi released in 1983. However, in this booklet, Kenner refers to Uncle Owen as Owen Skywalker, which would be the wrong name and incorrect even after George Lucas retconned Owen into the stepbrother of Anakin for the prequels. At this stage in 1979, very little of the backstory had been fleshed out, and based on information included in the movie, the Star Wars novelization, and even the Marvel Comics series, Owen as a Skywalker was a reasonable assumption on Kenner's part.
Darth Vader's final orders crackled through each trooper's headset. The words chillingly clear. Either come back with the plans or don't come back at all. It seemed impossible. Two mindless droids had made off with the design prints of the Empire's most devastating weapon, Death Star. As the search squad left the Imperial cruiser, a report came through from the onboard scanning stations. The droid's escape pod had been tracked to an arid region on Tatooine known as the Central Lowlands. The exact ground position had been lost as the pod went beyond the scanner's range, but in all that sand, a metal pod should not be hard to find, not with the Imperial Troop Transport. Landing at the preset coordinates, the troop transporter of the Imperial Empire was there to meet them. Long, sleek, deadly, with the Imperial crest over the side hatches. The great steel blue craft was operated by two drivers and could hold all 6 members of the search squad. Each trooper entered a traveling rack on the side of the transporter. They rode standing up in individual racks since their white and black armor made it almost impossible to sit. The rear of the vehicle contained a prisoner immobilization unit for the detention and taming of renegade droids. And for heavy resistance, there was always the laser blaster mounted on the upper deck. Even at night, the transporter looked fearsome with the glare of its black flip-up lights. One driver reported that dewback ground units had spotted the pod just a short distance to the north. Not bad for a dewback outfit, but the transporter would take over the search from that point. It could cover twice the distance in half the time. The transporter hovered a few feet above the surface and sped to the pod landing site. But the droids and the plans had long since gone. They left only 2 sets of tracks in the sand that were spared by the midday winds. The dewback had already gone after 1 set of tracks. The transporter locked on to the other set and headed east. The surface scanner in the transporter soon picked up an old Class D transport slogging through the sand, something the Jawas called a sand crawler. Over the external sound systems, they were ordered to halt in the name of the Empire. They kept moving. 2 rounds were fired across the sand crawler bow from the 50 megaton blaster on the upper deck. The Jawas stopped and came out to greet the Imperial boarding party. They had many droids in their inventory, but not the ones Darth Vader wanted back. 2 droids were looted from the cargo bay and placed in the droid prisoner compartment for further questioning. A sale had been recorded to one Owen Skywalker of 2 droids for his moisture farm. That's all the troop commander had to hear. The order was given to open fire, and the Jawas were cut down in mid-step, defenseless. As the transporter left to find the Skywalker farm, the heavy gun fired once at the sandcrawler's midsection. It exploded and burst into flames. Our friends are in danger when Imperial stormtroopers are on patrol. Doors to front pilot and co-pilot compartments open. Action figures not included, such as Imperial Stormtrooper, Death Star Commander, or Death Star Droid, might be at the controls. Imperial Stormtroopers are transported to the spot where Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi were last seen in the movie. The moving laser cannon spins a full 360 degrees, moves up and down. Control it by moving the radar dish in the opposite direction. A special rear compartment is used to transport captured droids. It looks like R2-D2 has been caught. Prisoners wear prisoner immobilization units over their heads. Stormtroopers use them to try and brainwash those loyal to the rebels. Your Imperial Troop Transporter and real Star Wars movie action sounds help you create your own stories and scenes. May the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like. If you'd like to see more like this, you should subscribe and set the bell notification. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.